Hey everybody, it's Paul, and welcome back to my series of raid guides for the Blackrock Foundry. In this video, I'm going to cover the encounter with Beastlord Darmac. As the name suggests, this encounter involves 3 different types of beasts that Darmac himself will mount at 85, 65, and 45% health. Whenever he is on the ground and near one of those percentages, he will mount the beast that is closest to him, so you can actually control which one he mounts first, second, and third. Throughout the entire encounter, Darmac will always have 2 abilities. One is called Call of the Pack, which summons these adds that I just thunderclap, and the other is called Pin Down. What Pin Down does is it creates 2 small silver swirly circles below 2 of your ranged members, and relatively quickly thereafter it will spawn 2 pins at those locations, and anybody caught under that will get pinned down and require the rest of the raid to kill the spear that has slammed them into the deck. Now our raid has chosen to do Cruel Fang first. Cruel Fang only has 2 abilities, and the one that he gives to the boss after he is dead is basically just a mechanic handled by the tanks and the melee. And because of this, the raid damage going out after this doggy is dead is significantly less than what happens after Iron Crusher and Dreadwing both die. What I'll call the less significant ability from Cruel Fang is called Savage Howl. This just requires an offensive dispel from one of your healers or DPS on Cruel Fang himself. And his other ability is called Rend and Tear, and Rend and Tear will persist throughout the entire fight when Beastlord Darmac is on the ground after Cruel Fang is dead. So let's talk about that real quick. Rend and Tear is targeted on the tank that is currently tanking Cruel Fang or later on Beastlord Darmac. When he casts the ability, he will hop back to a random rage member that will be affected by the debuff, and then he will hop back to the tank and strike anybody within 7 yards of either of these players. The best way to handle this is to have the tank that is currently on the boss stay put in place and have the range spread out. This ensures that 1, your off tank is not getting a higher count of the stacks and he can taunt back after his stacks have worn off. And it keeps the outgoing raid damage relatively low as only 1 ranged person and the tank are taking damage from the ability. I should note that for tanks this is particularly important, and it does become a little bit hectic when you're trying to pick up the adds from Call of the Pack. So you really have to be on your toes when you're that off tank to not get a higher stack, because it does eventually become unhealable. Now that Cruel Fang is dead, you'll see that Darmac has gained Rend and Tear, and we've moved him over to the Skull Marker. The reason we're at the Skull Marker is because we want him to jump to Iron Crusher next when he reaches 65% health. So what we do here is we tank him here. Again, the one that is on the boss stays put, and our off tank picks up the adds and brings him to the boss when, melee or range don't stun them way the fuck far away. Whenever you're not tanking the boss and Rend and Tear happens, you want to just run the fuck away from your tank. Like, even if you're sure that you're 7 yards away, go and keep running, because that is basically something you just want to get into the rhythm of doing, especially for the final phase of this fight. Throughout this phase, your raid should remain spread out, bring the adds to the boss, and rinse and repeat until he reaches 65%. Once he is at 65%, he will run to Iron Crusher. He will stop casting Rend and Tear, but continue to cast Call of the Pack and Pin Down. The tank swap debuff on Iron Crusher is just called Crush Armor. Simply taunt at 2 stacks and then taunt back after it has cleared. And make sure that your range keeps an eye out for Stampede, where Iron Crusher charges to basically just another random ranged member. The biggest thing that Iron Crusher adds to the entire encounter is called Tantrum. Tantrum does raid-wide AoE damage and continues after Iron Crusher dies, so your healers really need to start coordinating cooldowns early and keep the raid topped off so you never fall behind. Now from a tank perspective, Iron Crusher is one of the more relaxed portions of this fight. There's not a whole lot going on. The tank debuff is really simple to avoid, because if you're not tanking him, you're not going to get stacks. And all you really need to do is keep him on this blue marker that we have here so that melee are in close proximity to the adds. Now, one thing that we've chosen to do is right after Iron Crusher dies, our entire raid goes around, splits up, and kills all of the heavy spears that we have in the room. Heavy spears really don't become a problem until after the Dragon Drake Mutant add is dead, but it's good to really clear them out at this point, because otherwise you'll be dealing with way too many. So while Iron Crusher dies here, just one little comment on these little ads that come from Call of the Pack. They don't hit very hard, but you definitely want to pick them up quick and get them to the boss because, like I said, the healing output in the last phase of this fight is really what makes it or breaks it. And the quicker and better you are at picking these pack beasts up, the easier it's going to be on your healers in the end. I also mentioned this a little bit earlier, but it's really recommended that your melee or your range don't stun the beasts away from the boss, especially roots. We actually had somebody die here because the ads were rooted away from the boss and both the tanks were at the boss, and the ads just turned and meleeed down the person that was in melee range of them, Beastlord Darmac. So here's where we would kill the spears. We don't really have that many of them up, so we go ahead and drop down the ones that are up, and we keep Beastlord right here on blue so that we can just keep killing him and the ads. I'm actually going to fast forward through this because there's not really a whole lot going on. Keep in mind that he does keep casting Tantrum after Iron Crusher has died. Now up until this point, the fight's actually pretty straightforward right here, and Dreadwing coming out is really where the meat and potatoes of this encounter come into play, and that's mostly because you're combining the abilities from the first two phases along with very, very high raid damage from the fire things that Dreadwing does. So here you're going to see Darmac charge to Dreadwing, mount him. I'm going to go ahead and taunt and bring Dreadwing to the middle. Your range should immediately spread out around the room because Inferno Breath comes relatively quickly and you do not want to get hit by that shit. Now one note, this guy's tank debuff is applied through Searing Fangs. Basically each one of his melee attacks stacks a dot onto your tank. We try to taunt right around 7 to 10 stacks. It comes very quickly, and with Call of the Pack, it can become a little bit distracting. You can get distracted in tunnel vision really easily, so keep an eye on your debuff and taunt very soon after it falls off. As Dreadwing does more and more Inferno Breaths, what you want to do is you want to keep an eye on the ground. There's going to be a lot of fire, and especially you see a lot of healing rains, a lot of wild mushrooms under the boss. It starts becoming a little bit more difficult to see where the fuck you're standing. So as a tank, keep an eye on your feet and make sure that you do not stand in fire, because with that fire debuff from the boss on you, your health pool will drop real fucking fast if you end up, toasting your toes a little bit. I actually use pretty much all of my hard cooldowns for this part of the fight. We actually do really well here, and I don't even need to use that many, so I get to save them for the final phase of the boss. But right there, the tank damage can get very heavy, so please, please, please never stand in fire. And like I said, this final phase, this is your meat and potatoes. Bring all your ads to the boss as best as possible. Watch out for superheated shrapnel. That is a fire thing, just like the breath from Dreadwing. Keep an eye on Rend and Tear. Our other tank here, our Death Knight tank, is going to get his stacks real high because it does become a lot more difficult to locate where your tank that is on the boss is. So I would definitely recommend marking the tanks with something that's very recognizable in a fire-filled room. We use green and purple, but with all my on-screen warning shit and as the fire fills the room, it does become difficult to see. And a final note, when Call the Pack happens, be especially aware of any druids casting Tranquility because they will get a shitload of healing aggro. Now when you get to this phase, everything has to come together. Your ranged and your healers have to be avoiding pin down. Everybody has to be avoiding fire. You got to be picking up ads. Everybody's got to be avoiding Rend and Tear, and you got to be blowing healing cooldowns through Tantrum. Be smart with your battle reses. Don't tunnel vision as a tank. Make sure you're picking up ads and getting away from Rend and Tear. It becomes a little bit hectic, but it's not that bad once you've seen it a couple of times. All right, there I took a stack of his little breath and I died just because of that extra damage going out on top of whatever other debuffs I had. So right here it is pretty easy to tunnel on these Call of the Pack. You can get Rend and Tear stacks to go pretty high if you're not paying attention. So try and avoid that and you'll be good to go. Okay, I know this has been on the longer side of what I typically do as far as videos go, but it is a longer fight and there's a lot going on. But once you actually get it, you go through all the phases, it does become relatively simple and you'll be able to get your loot every week. So as usual, tune in on Twitch if you can on Tuesdays and Thursdays. This has been Paul. Thank you for watching this guide and I'll see you next time.